In today's video, I'm going to be going over how to make a forest level in RPG Maker MZ, but before I get into the engine side of things, there's a fair amount of game design and really level design theory that I want to go over first. And if you love RPG Maker tips, tricks, tutorials, and just general discussion about RPG Maker, then scroll down and hit subscribe and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I upload a new video. Now, I've been wanting to make this video for like a couple of weeks now, and you know, thinking about this video, I'm just like, how the f*** do you make a forest? Like, I know how to make it. I know how to make it look good. I know how to make it look pretty. But in terms of level design and the psychology and theory behind level design, I'm just like, shit. See, when it comes to making houses and towns in video games, that's like really easy. That's like the easiest thing to do because you don't have to put too much thought into it. There's a bit of psychology involved, but like a lot of it's just making it look pretty. But when you get into things like making a level, like a forest or a dungeon or any sort of level, there's a lot of thought that needs to go into it. So sit back, relax, because this is going to be a long one, and say hello to Scotch. So firstly, I guess the most important thing in level design is having a look at it and thinking, do you need this level? Is this level important to have? If it is, what purpose is the level there for? Why is the level here? Essentially what I'm saying is don't have a level for the sake of having a level. It needs to be there for a purpose. And that purpose could be you're hosting a fun little side quest in this level, but a purpose needs to be had. You don't just have someone walking through a forest for the sake of walking through a forest. So using the forest as our example, because this video is about making a forest in RPG Maker, the question I want you to ask yourself before you even consider designing this level is, what story point is this going to further? And what game mechanic are you testing the players on? And the reason these things are important is because having someone go into a forest merely for the point of going from point A to point B and fight some monsters in between is completely annoying, irrelevant, and does absolutely nothing for your game. If you take, for example, the Viridian Forest in Pokemon, that forest, that's purpose was to introduce the player to bug-type Pokemon. If you look at Guardia Forest in Chrono Trigger, that forest was there to serve a purpose for making a cutscene. So even though the cutscene happens later on in the game, they introduce that forest level to get the players used to this forest is here, and then later on there's going to be a cutscene. That's why it's a really easy forest to traverse. There's no hidden quests or puzzles or anything like that. It's simply, you start in the forest, you go through it really quickly, and then you're in the castle. The point of that forest is that later on there is a cutscene there, and in order to have a cutscene after the player leaves the castle, they needed a scene. So that scene was the forest scene. Final Fantasy VII only had 2 forest levels. One of them was the Forest of the Ancients, and the other was the Sleeping Forest. Now, the Sleeping Forest only had 2 maps in it, really. You had one where you were walking along and you could see down on the player as he was walking through the forest. The other part of that forest was a cutscene. So that forest existed really purely just to serve the purpose of a cutscene. The Forest of the Ancients, that existed as a side quest, an extra area you could visit, and that had a bunch of puzzles in it, and the player was rewarded by exploring that forest and doing the puzzles with extra materia and items that they could use throughout the game. Final Fantasy VI only had 1 forest level, and that forest level was the Phantom Forest. Now, the reason they had that forest level was so they could change the tone and atmosphere of the game, because they were about to go on the Ghost Train, that's the next level. But the Phantom Forest level, that serves as to change the music, to change the atmosphere, to change the tone, so that by the time you get to the Ghost Train, you've got this sense of spookiness and eeriness that was built up by the Phantom Forest. So what I'm getting at with this is all these AAA titles, they only have a couple of forest levels here and there, few and far between. So what they understand is, if you don't need a level, don't have a level. And that's going to be the most important thing. If you don't need a level, don't have a level. So moving on to reasons why you would need a level. There's a few reasons. One of them is for a puzzle, for a side quest, something extra for your players to do. Another one is that forest serves as a cutscene. It either furthers the plot or furthers character development. Finally, it can serve as something to test mechanics. I'll start by talking about the puzzle one, the side quest one, because that's the easiest. You don't have to put too much thought into the psychology behind that, as why that level exists. That level exists to test your players with puzzles, with battles, extra strong monsters, and the reward for doing this level is they get things like extra magic, extra items, stronger weapons. This serves as some side content which can add to the player experience. The next one I'll talk about is having a forest for a cutscene, or any real level for a cutscene. All of these things I'm saying, by the way, can be used in any level design. They're basic fundamentals of, if you don't need a level, don't have a level. So let's talk about the cutscene. The cutscene one is also very easy because that level doesn't have to be very big or very long, unless you're using it to further character development through like a small extended story, or you're trying to further plot by showing the characters different things that are happening in this forest that's affecting the main plot. For an example, and this example can bleed over into the next point as well, you have a forest so that the original characters can meet the next character that's going to join their party. You need this level so you can introduce that character in a cutscene. Another reason is so you can give the players monsters that they can test this character out on. And that brings me to my next point, is testing game mechanics. So one of the other reasons you have levels is mechanics. So it can be something like adding a new character to the party. So let's say you've got 2 warriors and the new character you add to the party is a white mage. What you do then is you put them through that forest level, and it has enemies that specifically inflict poison, specifically inflict some form of damage debuff or status effect that's undesirable to the characters. And then in doing so, the players now have this idea, well, I've got the white mage, I can use the white mage to heal these players. And really, you can't get past that forest unless you're using the specific mechanics that the game's just provided to you in the form of a new party member. And levels of those sorts go into some sort of flow. Like, I'll try and demonstrate it, but it starts out as the players with the normal, right? You've just got your 2 warriors, and the monsters they're fighting are just the normal monsters they've been fighting, right? Then they meet the new character joins the party. Now the monsters they're fighting, they inflict poison debuffs and status effects and whatnot. So now the players are tested with the new game mechanic. And then at the end of the level, you test the character's knowledge of the new mechanic as well as the combined previous mechanics. So you've got your 2 warriors. Those 2 warriors do lots of like piercing damage. So you're going to need that piercing damage instead of, say, slashing damage or bludgeoning damage that some of their other abilities might have, but you need them to use the piercing damage. You combine that with the fact that this new big boss monster uses things such as status debuffs and poison and all that sort of stuff. So you need to combine the old way you used to fight with your 2 characters with this new way of fighting by having this white mage cast positive status effects or heals and all that sort of stuff. So that's the other situation where you would have a level, is where you're introducing, testing, and challenging new game mechanics. So now, how do we translate this sort of theory of level design and really designing a forest into RPG Maker? So keeping in mind that you never have a level if you don't need to have a level, what we're going to do is we're going to design a level about the last 2 things. We're going to design it around a cutscene and the introduction of a new mechanic. So firstly, you can get out of RPG Maker, you don't need it. What you're going to do is open up Photoshop or a photo imaging software, or pen and paper works just fine as well. Now you can do this with a mouse. I'm personally just using a Wacom Intuos, but you can still do this with a mouse. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be concepting our level, because you want to always concept it before you get into the actual design of doing it all in game. By the way, just before we do all that, I did want to say I am now counting and scoring people who comment first, if they are the first comment on the video. So already in the lead, we have Nobita Resident Evil in first place, who's said first as the first comment 1 time since I started counting. So if you all want to get in there, you know what I mean? I'm going to create a new layer. Now, keeping in mind what we were talking about, testing the players on the new mechanics. So we want to give them the old mechanics first. So it'll be old mechanics. Then we want them to find a cutscene. This cutscene is going to introduce a new character with new mechanics. Moving on from there, we're going to test them with some different enemies that they would have been facing at the start. At the start, they would have been facing enemies with the old mechanics. Now they're going to be facing enemies with the new mechanics. After facing enemies with the new mechanics, we're just going to add in another puzzle. So there's going to be a tree blocking the path, an old dead tree, and there's going to be another new mechanic, which will be finding an old axe for them to cut down the dead tree. And the fun thing is while they're finding the new axe to cut down the dead tree, they'll also be testing the new mechanics by fighting the enemies that they're currently fighting. After they figure out this new mechanic, then it's going to be the final test. And what the final test is that's going to be a boss battle, which is going to combine some of the old mechanics with the new mechanics. So for the first section of our level, this is just going to be somewhere where the characters are testing their old mechanics. So I'm just going to make this 2 small sections. And in these 2 small sections, this is where the characters will be facing monsters they've already faced and monsters that don't really provide any status debuffs or anything like that. So this is going to be our first area of the forest where they enter here. There's going to be a very simple path which just goes from the start over here to maybe a treasure chest and then up into the next section. In terms of clutter elements, there's just going to be a few trees sporadically placed around the place. In this next scene, I'm just going to be changing the atmosphere for the players. So this area, this is going to be like a light sort of forest. So I'm going to place a river running through the middle of the map, and there's just going to be a bridge that crosses this river. Now, when the players get to here, what's going to happen is I'm going to tint the screen a darker color. Moving from here to here, I'm going to lower the volume of the music. This side might have 1 or 2 trees placed sporadically with the path still leading to the bridge. This side, there's going to be a lot of trees placed with lots of undergrowth and like lots of different plant life on the floor of the forest. Now, the next part of the forest is going to be a cutscene. So we'll just have this take place over here. So it doesn't need to be too big, just a very small, simple level. The players are going to enter through here and exit through here. But when they enter this level, a cutscene will play. And right in the center of the screen is going to be the new character. The music I'm going to have for this section of the game is going to be tense. So this new character is going to be in trouble. Maybe the character's being attacked by a monster or something of the sorts. And then in terms for the aesthetics of this level, there's going to be lots of trees, maybe a pond of water. But other than that, we're pretty much, really going to put a lot of effort into this scene. We're going to introduce this new character. Now, we're going to have a battle. After this cutscene, the new girl's going to join the party, and when she does, she's going to explain that a lot of the monsters in this forest have status debuffs, and with her magic, you're able to avert those status debuffs. So she's letting you know about the new mechanic before you continue. And then she's saying, are you guys traveling through this forest as well? Well, then I'm going to probably need your help to get through it. We need to get to the town on the other side or something like that. But that gives it a narrative reason to continue, as well as just testing the mechanics. Now, this next section of the forest, this is going to test the player's ability. So let's say they enter through here. There's going to be more of like a linear structure to it. So there's trees all along here. The players have to come over here. There's a branching path. So the players can come up here and go around here to maybe find some treasure. And then the players will have to come around here. And then the players will come around and exit this map over here. The next scene is just going to be the characters come into the map over here. So this is how they go in. They come into the map over here. And they're still being tested with the new mechanics and the new monsters. And when they get to over here, there's an obstacle, right? There's going to be a dead tree. And this dead tree is blocking their path. So in order to move forward, they need to find an axe somewhere. So what happens is this level is going to be broken up. There's going to be trees running down this side, so the players can come down over here. Then they're going to go up over here into a new map. Now again, this new map can be quite linear. So I have some trees coming out over here. The players make their way around, testing the new mechanics, and then they find an axe sitting in a tree, right? They pick up the axe, and then they go back to this level over here, coming to cut down the dead tree. Now, after they cut down the dead tree, they're going to be leaving this level through the south. And that's just going to take them to this area here. And in this area here, there's only one exit, which is over the other side, and that's the exit to the forest. But this is going to be a cutscene where they face the final test, and this is going to be a big bad monster. So now we understand how the flow of our level is going to be. So these first two levels are testing the mechanics of the game, like it's giving the players what they already know. This one over here is a cutscene. So, you know, up to this point, we've changed a bit of the music, we've had this cutscene. Moving on to this next part, now we're testing the new mechanics, as well as a new atmosphere, playing different types of music, all that sort of stuff. So the enemies that appear in this map over here are not going to be the same enemies that appeared in the original maps up here. So we're testing the character's knowledge of the new mechanics, as well as changing the atmosphere. Coming on to the next map over here, we come across the obstacle. And that obstacle needs an item, which is the axe, to pass. So they then go up the other side of this map, through the next map, and they find an axe. Then they come back, they get rid of the obstacle, and then finally they face a boss, which is going to really test their mettle, understanding the old mechanics, which are these ones, and the new mechanics. And this plus this equals this, which is the final test, and that's the boss. And that's how we're going to structure our level. So the aesthetics, we can do that really easily, and I'll show you some tips and tricks on how to do that. But in terms of structuring a level, we now have a level that's there for a reason, not there for the sake of being there. Now you can jump over to your RPG Maker editor. So we're just going to make a new map. I've already got one here, and it's just going to have the outside tile set, and I've just got this 17 by 13. Now if we look at our Photoshop drawing, this map is just a small little L hookish looking shape. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that with a path over here. So it's just going to be a path like that. And then I'm going to fill the area in with a lot of grass and trees. Now, when making forest maps, grass maps, any sort of maps that are like in nature, what I like to do is go over to the B tile. There's a whole range of different grass options over here. So what I'm going to do is click one of them and then just start placing it sporadically around the map. Once I'm happy with that randomness, I'm going to click on another one. And again, just start placing it sporadically around the map. And I'm going to do that for all of these different types of grass tiles. Okay, so I've finished mapping out everything that we dictated in Photoshop. Now it's time to get on to the meat of this level. First, we're going to need some characters. So here we go. We've got Slick, Vayner, and Macy. Now the party's going to start with Slick and Vayner. And so Slick and Vayner are just going to enter this forest and face enemies that they can deal with. So we have Slick, who uses a sword. We have Vayner, who uses magic. And we have Macy, who's the white mage. She's going to be doing all the healing and curing and whatnot. Now this first area of the forest is going to contain enemies that are good for Vayner and Slick. So these enemies aren't going to be dealing any status effects like poison. So we're going to have a wolf and a bear. And those are going to be the only monsters that are starting out in this starting area of the forest. But before moving on to the next scene, what we do want to do is put a little cutscene in here just explaining why they're in the forest. And just lastly, we're going to select a nice backing track for the start of this forest. I like this one. On the second map of the forest, in the middle of the bridge, what we're going to do is we're going to make a event which happens when the player touches it, and it's going to tint the screen. So we're going to go over to the second tab in the event commands and hit tint screen. And then we're going to tint it this sort of dark bluish greeny color to make it look like the canopy is starting to overlay the forest. And then we're going to uncheck wait for completion and hit OK. Then we're just going to do a self switch A and new event page, self switch A. Copy that event, and then we'll test it in game. And the reason we're testing it in game is just to make sure that the color works. There we go. Now that's actually quite dark, so what we're going to do is go back into that event and make it a little lighter. And this 60 frames is too little time, so I'm going to change that to 180 frames. There we go, that looks much better. That looks really cool. Also, pro tip, feel free to throw some treasure chests around to give your players a reward for exploring. Now in this next map, this is where the cutscene's going to take place, where Macy joins the party. So she's going to be under attack from some monster, and that monster's going to be doing things like inflicting status ailments on the party when they fight it. So I'll get to work on that. After we've done this cutscene, now it's time to move forward onto the next map, and in this map it's just going to contain enemies that now have mechanics such as poison and petrify that the new character Macy is able to counter. This is where you can place things like treasure chests hidden to the left or right as well. In this next scene we're going to be creating an event where the characters come down through the map, and then when they get to this point here, they're going to come across a log that needs to be cut in half because this log is blocking their path forward. So I'm just going to make this image the tile set be log. A log is blocking the way. Maybe there's something around here that can cut through. We're going to copy this event page and paste this event page. Now over here, what we're going to do is if switch, and I'm just going to turn it over here. Number 3 is going to be have axe. So if switch have axe is on, then let's cut this log. It'll play a small animation, and then it's going to turn on a self switch. And then you just go new event page, self switch A. So now what we have to do is find an axe. So this whole map is still going to have the same enemies. It's going to have the wolf and geckos, which the geckos are the things that unleash poison, the bear and geckos, and just the geckos. The difference is on this map, when we make our way through the level, at the very end here, there's just going to be an axe sticking out of the ground. We're going to go direction fix on, and simply when the player walks up to the axe, this could come in handy. What we're going to do is turn on the control switch for have axe. A new event page, if have axe is on, nothing will happen. Now this final map is going to be where we have our boss encounter, and now we just need to make a bit of a cutscene for it. Alright, so there we go. What we've done is we've created our level, and I'll go over it one more time. So this forest level in our first scene, we've got these two having a little cutscene talking about having to go through the forest. Now for this map and this map here, the enemies are going to be enemies that don't do any sort of status debuff effects or anything like that, because that's what they're used to. When we cross this bridge, the scene darkens, showing that they're going deeper and deeper into the forest. When we get to this scene here, they find a new character who's being attacked, so they run in and help her out, and then she joins the party. This monster that they were fighting is using status debuff effects like poison. She joins the party, and then they continue. Now, the monsters in these areas are different to the monsters in the previous areas. The monsters in these areas have the ability to inflict status debuffs. So that's where the players are training with the new skills that they have with the new character Macy. Getting over here, they find a puzzle, which is this little tree that's blocking their road. They then have to go over to this map here to find the axe to get through. And then once they do that, this entire time, they're getting this axe, so they know in the future they might be able to cut down things like this in other levels. So it's teaching them a new mechanic. They're also learning the new mechanics of Macy's healing abilities and curing abilities. Then, finally, when they get to this scene where there's a boss, they test out the new healing mechanics with a hard version of some of the more basic enemies. So that's essentially how the level is set up. It's less about making the forest look good, and I can do a video about making a forest look good in the future. But, you know, when designing a level, it's more about the flow of the level than it is about how good the level looks. The look is still important, but if you've got a really good looking level and it's got absolutely no flow and the level doesn't need to be there, then it's going to be a bad level. If you guys want to see me do a small playthrough of the level that we've just created, then there's going to be a card appearing in the corner right here, so you can click on that link and go check out that level. Just one more thing though. This video is sponsored by myself. I have an itch.io page where I upload some super special awesome RPG Maker resources, like Ye Old Bedroom, Pirate Bedroom, fully animated modern and sci-fi doors, this sweet quest board, and this modern stove and stuff. Now I am constantly making more and more RPG Maker assets, so this list is set to grow. And if you really want to support the work I do here on YouTube, consider signing up to my Patreon. You get behind the scenes updates, a personalized thank you message from myself, level 2 subscription can get you free downloads of all of those itch.io products I have online, and level 3 gets you early access to the videos that I make, as well as the ability to vote on the video for the next week. And if you love RPG Maker tips, tricks, tutorials, and just general discussion about RPG Maker, then scroll down and hit subscribe and the bell icon so you get notified whenever I upload a new video.